Confessions of a Rugby Fixer with Harry Jones.
These are the confessions of a rugby fixer. Rugby fixed me, put me on the right path. My clients are now my friends are my clients. Rugby's my passion, but also my business. These are the things that I've learned, and I will confess on Sundays. Why Sundays? Because you first got to have Saturday to get some ammunition for a confession. And this is the confessional box, you and me. What I've learned is that you have to be ready all the time as a fixer. You don't really you cannot have off days. You don't really get to have moods. You have to be willing to take on the problems of the world and turn them around. In one case, I had a guy call me, he's a military hero, in a think tank full of military heroes. And they were stolen from by a military hero. And the task was quite simple. Find him, get the money back. Don't want to have to tell all the investors. Don't want to have a press release. Don't want to call the cops because the crime hasn't really theoretically been proven. And so he might be in the Virgin Islands by the time we nab him. Plus, we won't get the money. That'll be seized and impounded. 96 hours, he said. Why 96? Well, Harry, because I started in Kuwait in a tank and I was in Baghdad 96 hours later. So why can't you get my money back in that time and find X? He's easy to find. He's a big, tall guy. He's a military hero. Over the next 96 hours, well, actually, let's say it's 100. We had the confession done over the phone, and then signed confession and a promise to return the money at a certain time, a certain place, in the early morning in a field, in his Range Rover that he had gotten from the stolen money, got a lease and then paid it off, so there was not really any way to say that the vehicle itself could be seized. And off he went. He reneged. He was into the wind. I had to get to know and convince the fiancée to let me use her app and find where Range Rover showed me where he was going. To the airport in Houston. Stop him there. Then he just goes left. He goes to New Orleans. I had to befriend a person in the parking garage there. Who would let the air out of the tires and at least stymie the progress of the car. But then he tried to buy a boat on the docks in New Orleans. Stop him there. Try to create a honeypot. Didn't work. Talk to the ex-wife. Where will he go when he's really up against it? Get all of his friends and family and children and people from the military to text him at exactly the same time saying, just give up. Harry will find you. Then he goes into a run mode. Ex-wife tells me, he loves Johnny Cash. When it all comes down to it, if he's really on the run, he'll find a Johnny Cash angle. There's a museum in Nashville and there's a statue in Memphis. Turns out he was at the statue. We got him. The money, the set is safe, but we can realize that most of it's not there. There's about 1 million or so, but there's a couple of million not. In the jail, befriend the cellmate. The cellmate tells me where the money is. In a house, gotta talk to the landlord, make sure the landlord knows what I'm doing. We find the money behind a wall, case closed. What did I learn from all that? And how's that related to rugby? First, you gotta peak at game time. Whatever's going on with you on a Friday or a Monday, whatever's happening in your life, you gotta divorce yourself from it and peak at game time. In a tournament, you gotta peak at the final. A year ago, as we went game after game after game, I was there at the pool match when the ball was not available, but it wasn't. Lose to Ireland, titanic struggle with France, overcome England, and win the final. Those two teams that made it to the final got better as the tournament went on. Some other teams peaked early, or even peaked before the tournament. You have to be ready for game time, and you have to have an easy way to be ready. It cannot be full of idiosyncrasies. I got to have the right pen. I've got to have the right climate. I don't play in the rain. My toilet regimen is messed up. You've got to get ready for the game. You've got to have that body ready, that mind ready. Number two, get behind enemy lines. Okay, it can go too far. Like when you have two shooters against the All Blacks and Caleb Clark just keeps running in tries for fun. But generally speaking, you've got to get someone behind enemy lines. So for me, that was getting to the ex-wife, getting to the fiance, getting to the parking attendant at New Orleans airport, getting to a guy who sells boats on the docks, finding a way to understand the cellmate, getting to the landlord. You cannot sit behind your own lines and have schematics and ornate game plans and all kinds of X's and O's. You've got to disrupt the enemy. You've got to get inside the brain so that at 24 hours, 48 hours, half time, and then full time, you're the one driving the action. You got the money safe, reputation intact, bad guy in jail, but no one is taking your money. Third thing is a time squeeze. There's a strange thing about rugby in that it's very difficult if you actually didn't have any clock available and you asked each player how much time had elapsed, they would give you a different answer. Frans Malherbe famously said the same about a knockout match, just being really surprised, looking up and seeing how much time had elapsed. It didn't match what he thought was true. Einstein, as a young man, was given a task by Switzerland, which was to synchronize the clocks of the towns in Switzerland. And he came back to his bosses and said, it's actually a fiction. It's more accurate to have different time in each town. It turns out that time is relative, he said. They didn't believe him, but he explosively proved himself to be true in the end. Einstein was talking about the fact that the only sure tell is when the sun is directly overhead at noon. That is exactly when noon is in Zurich or Basel or Geneva. It is not an artificial moment in time that we use with time zones or that everyone thinks right now we're at the same time if we looked at our iPhones. It turns out if you live high above sea level, if you could manage to live on top of Mount Everest, you would have a longer life, a Shangri-La life than you would if you were on the shores of the Dead Sea below sea level. Time is a squeeze in rugby. At the end of it all, you're trying sometimes to make the clock run out in as quick a time as possible, and you have to have a sensation of that. And other times, you're begging that the time continue. And sometimes you're just in a squeeze in a scrum where you're going to have a reset, there's a kerfuffle, there's a this and a that, and the time's gone. But rugby is all about managing time. We did not, chasing X, have the luxury of time, because at any point in time, if he was able to get out with a boat and land up in St. Thomas, he'd have been done, and we'd have lost. The team, even though someone thinks they're good and ready for something like creating diversion, lure, temptation, they may not be your best emissary, and teams have to understand what they are and what role they are. I know my role is to call someone out of the blue or show up in their life, jar them, disturb them, and then put it right. I'm not the long game guy. I'm the shock and awe guy. There are other ways to win, and there are other ways to play it out. You cannot use the same thing in a blackmail as you can in a theft. In rugby, if you find yourself against an adversary that knows who they are and is willing to grind, like England in the semifinal, there's a different way you play than when you are playing against Madcap France in the quarterfinal with a deafening disco sound and pell-mell, hell for leather. What I've learned, though, is in all those ways you have to have information. He who can scan the field and pick up what we are doing, what type of match this is going to be better at presenting that so-called picture to the referee. So why do you don't call the cops when people steal money from you? Is because the cops will take the money. Why do you want to not be TJ Perenara bleating at the referee all the time, or even post-match submitting sketchy and dubious videos of what they did wrong? Is that's not what they're really about. Your job and the cop's job is a different job. Your job and the referee's job is a different job. You have to understand that, or you'll fix nothing. You'll make everything worse. You have to be bold in the end. You have to be willing to be decisive and strike a blow. Forget this approach and go another way. You've got to guess between the statue of Johnny Cash and the museum of Johnny Cash. And you kind of have to get lucky and be right. Inside boldness is belief. What I've seen about rugby teams that win consistently and get to that 75, 80, 85% is that when it all comes down to it, they're not stubborn. It's not about stubbornness. That's always been a fallacy. In South Africa, we've been at our worst when we were the most stubborn. We've been at our best when we're the most innovative. And right now, we're in an age of rugby innovation, where we try everything. We go to the docks, we go to the airport, we let the air out of the tires, we create a honeypot, we go to the museum, we go to the statue, we find the wall behind the bedroom. If we have to talk to the landlord, we do it. We never stop trying. We always do our best, but not stubbornly. So there are ways and means to overcome an enemy, but all rests on our belief that we'll be bold when the moment strikes, but we have many ways to win. I don't know what lies in store next for the Springbok team. I don't know what the journey is. Succession plans bother us, right? If in the middle of 96 hours, I got hit by a bus, then our whole game plan would have been gone. We are, in a way, just as dependent as the French are on Dupont right now, but on a coach. That coach's ways of expressing himself are often strange and mystical. They are as haphazard and chaotic as this confession, because they sometimes wander into parables and analogies and metaphors that are mixed to be charitable to them. But I think the guys understand where he's coming from. And one thing is clear: when you're in the middle of fixing a problem, whether it is a problem of blackmail where someone is telling you, I will publish this entire sex video to the world at large or to your entire synagogue within this many hours, 96 hours, unless I get this, this, and this. Or you're working with a more perishable product where it is a drive, a flash drive containing information, and you have to secure it or incinerate it, or you have to understand the relics and artifacts thereof. All of those things amount to a clear idea of who you are, how much time you have, what the real problem is, and never, ever bog down in a stubborn framing of the issue that is not flexible and agile. I don't think I ever really wanted to become the kind of thing I became. I think when I was young, I dreamed of having a yacht that I sailed around the world and just learned some musical instrument really well and wrote and fought on the docks and was a bullfighter and had some sort of facsimile of Ernest Hemingway's life, where I lived large and broke as many hearts as possible. In reality, you don't get to choose what you are in life. We have the illusion of free will, but you will find a place and time where people tell you what you're good at. And in rugby, you have to be willing to listen, as in life. I'll be presenting these confessions every week on a Sunday and try to draw a clear line between what it does, what it works in life and what works in rugby. I hope you'll join me, because this is just the start, and the stories are going to get better. They are going to, in some cases, blow your mind, and in some cases, they'll be sweet and kind. I learned in interrogations that you get more out of being kind. If you can sit in a room, look modestly scary, maybe you toss something against a wall every now and then, but if you can try to understand where the person comes from, hear him out, and even find a way to love him, you'll learn more. I've never been in a more loving environment than a rugby team. It is the great refuge of people who are trying to find their way. Other sports too, but rugby in particular, because of the things that happen on the field where you're found out, you're exposed, and you have no hiding. You just come back in and you have to face your teammates and say, that didn't work. So now we go to a different place. We don't have to be fixated on an airport in Houston. Now we're at the docks in New Orleans. Never stop trying and never stop inventing. See you soon.
This is the Confessions of a Rugby Fixer with Harry Jones.